10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 259. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 259 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. As always, I hope you're all doing well out there, and thank you so much for tuning in. So this week is our Tune of the Month episode, and you probably guessed it already, but we are going to be looking at Pent House this week. This tune is, of course, by the great Sonny Rollins, but last week we looked at a really cool solo excerpt from Clifford Brown. So that is why we are going to follow through and look at this tune. As usual, before we jump into the show, just wanted to let you know that you can get the PDFs for this episode and every other episode that we've ever done on our Patreon site. This is a listener-supported podcast. You will not hear any advertisements. And the way that we keep things going is by small monthly donations from people like you. And you get some pretty fantastic returns for that investment each and every month when it comes to jazz education. So if you want to check out the Patreon memberships, check out what you get and how much they cost, you can head over to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners. You get all the info, and when you sign up, you get instant access to all of that material. Got some new patrons to thank. Thank you to Ryan for becoming a new $5 patron, and thank you to John for editing your pledge from $3 up to $5. Really appreciate it, and as always, we really appreciate everybody over there that has chosen to spend their hard-earned money on keeping this show going. So again, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, get yourself signed up. All right, let's jump into today's episode. So let's start by going over the chord progression to Pent House. Now, I will say that the melody to this tune is one of the most interesting melodies ever written. I just adore the melody to this particular composition. So that would be a great place to start. It's very repetitive, very rhythmic, and it's going to be a great melody for you to learn. Also keep in mind that this tune is usually played at a fairly fast, medium to up tempo. So when you're learning it, just make sure you learn it well enough to play it, like 160 and above. But definitely start with the melody. We won't be going over that in this episode. We usually don't, but we are going to talk about the chord progression. So first things first, we have a 16 measure form. And the good news about this tune is that it's really not that complicated. So the tune is in the key of concert G, and what we see in the first four measures is a simple 2-5-1 in that key of G. Now in the second 8 bars, we see the exact same thing, another 2-5-1 in the key of G. Now what we get in measure 9 is we actually are going to start a 2-5-1 in the key of concert C. So what we do is we go up to the 2, which is concert D minor, and then we go to the 5, which is G7. And then actually what happens here, instead of resolving to C major, which is really what we'd expect to happen, we actually go to C minor 7 and we start this little deceptive cadence that sounds like it's going to go to B flat major. So we have a 2-5 in the key of B flat major, C minor 7 to F7. But then we do not go to the key of B flat major. Instead, what we do is we jump right back into a 2-5 to the key of G. And then we resolve nicely at the end of the tune, right back to the key of G. So the really interesting part here is measures 9 through 12, because it does a little deceptive harmony there. And what can happen when you're soloing over this is you get so caught up in that harmonic motion that you think is going to go to B flat that instead goes back to that A minor chord, is that part of the tune can really mess you up. So I think you'll have to work on the second half of the tune, the second 8 bars, a little bit more than the beginning, because obviously the beginning is just 2-5-1s in the key of G. So let's listen to the chord progression just one time through, and I want you to pay particular attention to that spot spot where we get that deceptive cadence, right? So that would be measure 11 and 12 going into measure 13. Keep your ears on that. Now, you will get used to that the more times you play through this, but at first that may seem a little bit jarring, okay? So just be aware of that when you're playing through this. And once you know the melody, it actually makes a lot more sense because you can kind of hear the melody in your head and you understand why that particular chord transition is actually happening because it fits the melody very, very nicely. All right, so now what I'm going to do is play a recording of the etude that I've written for all of you this week, and then we're going to talk about what I was thinking about when I wrote it. Here we go. All right, so if you have the PDF in front of you, now is the time to take it out and we'll go over a few of those things. So the big thing that I was considering when I wrote this comes from part 3 of the Play Better Lines series that we did this month. If you recall, in that episode, I mentioned how important the third episode was and how much that syncopation is going to help your solos and your lines. So that's really where I tried to come from. And then I sort of combined it with Clifford Brown's idea from last week's episode, which was these little 3-note phrases that come in on the ands. So if you look at right at the beginning of the etude, you will notice that I have 2 3-note groupings that come in on the and of 1 and then again on the and of 3. Okay. Now, if you look at measure 4, you'll notice I'm coming in on the and of 3. Measure 5, again on the and of 3. Measure 6, I've got a little 3-note phrase that comes in on the and of 2. So that's the idea that I'm really trying to hammer in this particular etude. One more spot where it's really, really evident where I'm trying to use those syncopated 3/8 note things is at the very, very end. So measure 29, you'll see that I have 2 entire measures of these little 3-note fragments, and they start on the and of 1, the and of 3, the and of 1, and the and of 3. So at the end, I'm really just trying to put a period on the etude by really highlighting that idea that I came into the etude with, which was those syncopated 3-note segments. Now, one other thing that I was trying to think about was the fact that this tune is literally just 2/5 progressions the entire time in several different keys. I was trying to do a nice mixture of like inside 2/5/1 stuff and getting a little bit more out, a little bit more spicy with my 2/5/1s at other moments. So you'll notice some of them are pretty traditional. I might have thrown in a flat 9 here or there, like measure 1 and 2. That is a pretty vanilla 2/5/1. I just have 1 flat 9 in there. Otherwise, it's pretty straight up. The second one in measure 5, again, pretty straight up. Then in measure 9, I'm starting to get a little bit more out and trying to incorporate some tension into that. And then by the time I get to like measure 17, 18, the second chorus, you'll notice in measure 18, I'm really leaning on that whole tone sound and trying to create something interesting with it. And then in measure 26, I'm doing like a tritone substitution kind of thing. So I was really trying to strike a balance balance between some inside stuff and some outside stuff. And that kind of goes into what we were talking about in our previous episodes this month as well. So a nice mix of both of those can really make your playing very compelling. And if you're going to write your own etude, or if you're going to work on Pent Up House after listening to this episode, that would be a great thing to think about, as well as the syncopation. But I definitely want you to start with the syncopation. I think that that is going to improve your playing the most right away. Okay, so have some fun with that etude. Remember, your assignment is to learn the melody to Pent Up House, then memorize the chord changes, which should not be very hard on this tune at all. And then you want to learn that etude and then put some of the concepts into action in your own playing and start improvising over that. If you've got any questions about anything, you can always get in touch with me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group, or you can get in touch with me at 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com. And remember, you will get the etude in B flat, E flat, C, and bass clef over on the Patreon site. And if you're a $5 patron, you'll also get a copy of me playing the etude, plus you will get a high quality backing track of Pent Up House. So have fun with that. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope you all enjoyed this episode. Hope you are all doing well out there, staying safe and healthy. And we'll see you next month with some brand new episodes. Have a good one, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.